Hi there! Welcome back to Wrenching with Wyatt. We're on episode number 2 of a multi-part series on a 97 Mustang Cobra that I'm putting back together. At the end of last episode, I'd mentioned that I've got a long block, or not a long block, but I've got a short block that's going to need some work. After doing some mulling around and searching through the classifieds, I found a short block, got it bought. Guy's supposed to have it shipped to me here next day or two, so hopefully we'll see it by the end of the week. I'm not holding my breath. Fingers crossed. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to pull these heads that I've got over here, put them up on the bench, kind of take a look at them, see what all we're dealing with. Take them apart. Like I said, I noticed there were some issues on them. Verified that the cams in it are actually Cobra camshafts. If they're not, throw those things in the trash and put Cobra cams in it. Let's get started. Got these heads up on the bench here, and right away, we both notice they're quite dirty. Just look right there. That's a concern. That is actually a lot worse than I initially thought it was. At least it's the intake cam. Hopefully I should be able to make something work with some of the spares that I got laying around. The other thing that if I can get this dang camera to focus. And I apologize, guys, my lighting's not the best. I'm working in kind of a darker garage here. It's windier and all get out outside. You guys may be able to hear the squeaking in the building itself. But another concern that I noticed here is the intake ports. There are 2 ports per cylinder. One of them is the secondary and one of them is the primary. The secondaries on these heads are prone to have a lot of carbon buildup and caking from the PCV system and EGR systems. Because if you look, this one has a cutout where the injector will be shooting fuel into the port, but this one does not. So what happens over time, like I said, you get carbon buildup on the backside of the valve, and it just makes them gummy and sticky. So there are a few ways you can take and fix that. You can pull the head apart, put it in a soak tank. You can get fancy with a little bit of carb cleaner and a brush, or if it's real bad, take it and, like I said, pull it completely down, do a valve job and all of that stuff. I really don't want to have to pull these heads down. I don't think I'm going to have to do that. But if I have to, I have to. That's part of it. So I will get these disassembled a little bit and show you what we're working with. So I don't know if you guys noticed the same thing that I noticed. Those keys don't line up in the slightest. I pulled the cam locks off the back of this head because I'm pulling it apart and the cams jumped. I went, huh, that's funny. I laid the head down and then I started getting ready to pull the timing chain and I went, huh, that's not good. So there is a good thing to note from this. These are the earlier 93 to 98 cams. The later ones had a timing gear that would actually have a tooth cut into it, which would slide in to that groove cut on the cam. And another thing, these are the larger 12mm bolts as opposed to the 10mm bolts that the 99 and later cams had. So that's just kind of a good thing to note here. So let me continue on tear down and I'll come grab you guys again. So I've experienced my first issue with film. Yeah. Apparently I didn't get the camera to focus when I filmed this sequence that I'm going to do now. So, if I remember correctly, in that film sequence, I was disassembling the cylinder heads to inspect and clean them. On disassembly of the cylinder head, I found the intake cam, which would have been on the passenger side, had some concerns. I don't know if you guys can tell, but that cam lobe right there is severely pitted and has a lot of problems. I will also note that it's got an F2LE engineering number. What that tells me is the cylinder heads off of the already assembled engine back here are off of a 93 to 98 Lincoln Mark 8. We've already gone over this, but I also believe those cylinder heads were off of a 93 or 94 going off of the casting dates on them. So, I also had mentioned that I've got Cobra cams laying around. I am going to throw this cam in the garbage and install Cobra cams into this engine. Now, I'm not going to give you guys too many specific details about the already assembled engine over here because that will be coming up in a later video. So, another thing I want to note, that is a 10 mil. That is also a 10 mil. I think that is my 10 mil. No, this is my other 10 mil. Correct, alright. So what I also want to mention is I will be putting the later style 10mm bolted cams in. Not for the simple, or not because they're strong or anything, but because I have already got timing gears on them. They've already got the correct timing set up for them. Fun fact, all exhaust cams for the 4-valve, naturally aspirated 4 valves, from 1993 to 2005, all shared the same duration and lobe separation. They were all, I believe, 180 something degree duration. They were a shorter duration than the intake cams. I may be wrong on that. I don't have the torque spec, or not the torque specs, but I don't have the cam specs memorized by heart. I will just be putting the later style cams in just for the ease of swapping timing sets around and making it work. There is nothing wrong with doing that. Putting a later cam in an older engine, you just run into a little bit of timing chain differences or timing set differences. It's not hard to correct. It's literally buy the correct chains and gears for that engine and slap it on and time it as you would normally. And actually the gears for the most part are interchangeable. I know I had mentioned that the 93 to 97 or 98 cams have a little different keyway slot, but that's not a major concern. It's just verify you've got the correct slot or correct key for the cam. So, like I said, I had to redo this chute. You guys can clearly see behind me that this engine is, for the most part, assembled. I am actually kind of laying everything out on it, so you guys will see me take it apart. I won't take it apart, but I will take it apart and then show you guys putting it together, what all I have done and what all I have to do before I put it in the car. Currently, nothing is torqued down. It is just sat on there looking ready to go. So that will be up in the following video to this one. So, to the next scene. Here we go. So as I had mentioned, these B heads had a problem where the secondary ports would gunk up and get all dirty and cause performance issues. Now, it is technically not an issue on the head, but is actually for the intake manifold. There is something called an intake manifold runner control valve. There's a valve that sits over this intake that stays closed under 3,000 RPMs. When the engine is over 3,000 RPMs, it opens and allows that cylinder air. Ford did this in the 90s because these are like a 180 cc chamber. I may be pulling that number square out of my behind because right now I don't have the spec sheet in front of me. But I know they're a very large intake chamber volume, or intake vault. I know there is a lot of intake port volume for a 281 cubic inch engine. Now, you're going to be flowing a lot of air at 7,000 RPMs, but when you're running stoplight to stoplight anywhere from 2,500 to 4,500, I mean, you're going to be shifting higher than that, but you're going to be taking off those RPMs depending on how your car's set up. That extremely large port volume is going to cause for low speed velocity issues, causing low speed engine performance. This specific design of head right here has been, I believe, 5 or 6 seconds in the quarter mile. But the gentleman that runs them pushes like 60 pounds of boost and spins the engine to 10,000 RPM. So that kind of gives you an example of how these heads perform in a high load, high speed setup. They're great for that, but daily driving and street racing, even quarter-mile tracks in a typical car that you and I would be able to build, these heads are very poor. Now, what Ford did, like I said, is they made that valve, so they're effectively cutting the intake volume in half, to where you're just shooting in one cylinder. Now, over time, you can see you're shooting fuel into one cylinder, keeping it nice and clean, but with all the PCV and EGR, you're dirtying up that other cylinder. So it becomes gunked up, you lose performance. And what happens is these intake manifold valves will stick closed and they'll never open. A lot of guys have problems with them. They end up deleting them, but they also, when they do that, cause themselves some low-end performance loss. So that's not a terrible issue. It's just something a lot of people deal with. They'll put deeper gears in the cars. Instead of having 373s, they'll go to 410s or 430s, kind of make up for the difference. It's all in how you want to cut the cake. I mean, it works. I've got my opinions on it. I think these heads for a street or a street car are worthless. I mean, I had a set a few years ago I couldn't give away, so I ended up throwing them in the scrap heap. So that's just kind of my experience on them. But for a car that still has the intake manifold control valves, and that I'm putting back together in a stock application cell, these heads will be just fine. They'll make the 305 advertised horsepower that the car should make at the crank, if not some more, because the car does have a few other things that I did note. But otherwise, it's going to be a stock car. The cam followers, I think there was, 5 of them that had some rust issues. I don't know if that's focusing at all. Yeah, the reflection's kind of screwing it up. Some of them had some rust on them. I'll probably buy some replacements just to put in it if I can't find any ones that'll work for this application in my stockpile. Tearing the heads down, there's nothing fancy to it. There's just little girders that hold the cams down, that bolt to that. You got to make sure you put them back in the. You got to make sure you put these back where they came from, because they are mated to the cam bore. So I can't put the one that came from here on this one because it will mess up the cam bore alignment. And it's very expensive to get replaced or repaired, and a lot of guys just end up throwing the heads away. I've seen sets of $1,500 heads thrown away because these cam bores were messed up or someone didn't have the cam caps for them. So it's very specific on these modulars to keep the cam caps in the order they came from. And another thing I'm impressed with is how clean it is. Yeah, it's got dirt and grime from sitting with the cam covers off and everything, but there's no oil staining. I mean, yeah, there's a little gold on there, but it's not brown. This engine was taken care of. The gentleman that I bought it from tore it down because he wanted to put a timing set in it. I think the timing chain slack adjusters ended up failing, causing the chain to smack around and break the guides. So that explains why I had a new timing kit for it. This is kind of easily remedied. This is easily remedied with a new timing kit, so I am not worried about that. I'll clean these heads up, I'll clean these ports out, and then these heads will be ready to go back on. I'll probably send them to the machine shop and have them playing, because I did notice when I moved them I nicked the mating surface to the cylinder head a little bit. Not a big issue, $100, takes care of the problem. So I'm going to tear the other head down. I'm going to leave you guys off right here for now. I'll come back to you when I get the new engine, or I wouldn't say new engine, but when I get the new to me short block for this, so I can go ahead and put it back together. I'll bring you guys back once I get these heads cleaned as well, so I can show you the before and afters of what we had here, and hopefully everything makes sense to you guys. I know I'm talking a million miles an hour and probably talking faster than you can grab knowledge. I'm kind of nervous, so I've never filmed anything like this before, and I just want to make sure I get the most knowledge out there that's correct. I don't want any improper knowledge. If I put numbers out and if they're wrong, I will go in and correct them. You may see it by now. So yeah, we will go from there. So up here at the old man's place, I'm going to use this welder because if you look very closely, you'll see I've got a bolt broken off in this cylinder head, which is not a good thing considering this here is the oil gallery for the passenger side timing chain tensioner or secondary timing chain tensioner. I'm going to need both of these so I can seal that metal surface together and not have any oil leaks so I can get enough oil pressure into that tensioner. So I'm going to show you guys here in a second how I take these broken bolts out. So before I weld on this, I figured I'd tape up the oil galleries so they don't get full of debris and whatnot. If it burns back a little bit, I'm not terribly worried about it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld a nub onto that. I typically don't use washers or nuts unless it's a very severe situation. But I am also concerned of why this bolt broke off. It is an M6 headed, or it's it. It is an M6 bolt, which really should not have broke if these threads were clean. But I do not know the situation. The guy may have moved the head, dropped it, or moved something else on it and broke it. I don't know. All I know is it's broke and I need to get it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this welder, like I said, weld a nub on that, and then I'm going to take a vice grip or pair of vice grips and back that out. I'm going to get the camera set up here and hopefully I can get it out on the first try. So I'm going to let this nub cool down a little bit while I go get a pair of vice grips and I'll see if it'll back out. No. Broke that off, which I'm not surprised. The welder had a little bit of corrosion on the end of it, and along with the stuff that was on top of that bolt, so it may take me a time or two to get it. That's peculiar. Back the heat down a little bit. More control though.
this bolt is galled in the head here, so that's gonna be interesting getting out. I'm gonna fight a little bit with this off camera. We'll see what I can get done.
So after some choice words and a little time with the welder and some time on a vice grip, I finally got the bolt to take. For a minute there, I honestly thought I was going to have to buy another head because it would not budge. So turned the heat up a little bit more, backed the wire speed down some so I controlled it, and well, it finally caught. So hopefully you guys can see she just backs right on out. I kind of want to grab that, but yeah, she's cooled down enough. Spin her out with my fingers. Yeah. I'll have to clean this up a little bit, but I'm not terribly worried about that. The area that I'm really worried about is up in here. That really sits separate from that passageway, so that's fine. And I've got some cleaning out of the other bores to do, but nothing a little time with an air gun won't fix. Had 9 attempts right there. Every one of those little balls is a nub that I welded on top of this thing. Like I said, some guys will tell you to weld washers and nuts on, and that works, but honestly I think that's a waste for stuff like this. And if you know you're going to break stuff off quite a bit, just take your time, build a little nub up and clip onto it with some vice grips. So after the work on the head, I was able to get this on and torque down to spec and whatnot. I'm not going to bore you with the numbers and everything. But I went in, put the lash adjusters and the cam followers back in this head. I've already done that head down there off camera because I'm not going to bore you guys with the same old, same old. I mean, it's basically tying things up, line the dots up on the chains, set the cams in, and bada bing, bada boom. Now, there is one thing I want to teach you guys about these Ford heads. See how shiny those cam journals are? Give me a second here. You see how shiny those cam journals are, how polished they are and whatnot. This head over here is off of a truck that I had. Long story short, I took and put a 4-valve in place of a 2-valve Ford. Just minor differences in the heads and whatnot, and some tuning differences, but they swap right around. But coming over here, I blew this engine up. Now if you look, that is completely destroyed. See the metal shavings in and around over here, around that oil passage? That head is junk. It lost oil lubrication to the top of the engine when I spun a rod bearing, and I completely junked this head. Once you destroy the head's junk. I mean, there are guys out there that'll take and have little bearings put in these, or they'll cut the caps, lower them, and have these line bored again. But on this high volume head, or whatever you want to call it, it's cheaper to throw them in the trash and go get a different head. I mean, it's a Lincoln Navigator head. It's nothing fancy. I mean, it's got the large ports. No one really uses them unless you're on a 5.4. On these 4.6s, these Cobra heads here, seeing how they're the dual port B heads, people pretty much give these heads away. I mean, it would have been cheaper for me, theoretically, to throw this head in the trash rather than pull that broken bolt out. I wanted to show you guys what I do. I figured it was worth my time to try it on this. It was actually not too bad. Just a little bit of time and patience. I was getting kind of impatient there at the end, about ready to call it quits, but I got lucky. So hopefully, here in a little bit, I'll probably do it tomorrow morning. It's starting to get pretty dark out. But tomorrow morning I'll go time the cams up. The way I do it is not exactly the right way to do it, but it's not the wrong way to do it. I mean, there's kind of some shortcuts you can take. I'm trying to prevent from buying new bolts and whatnot for these because these are a torque to yield bolt. So I'm just going to slide the chains in from the back and then set it on the secondary gears and then roll the cams in onto the platforms there, just making sure I don't lose anything, and then torquing them down and in. So I'll be back with you guys in the morning and I'll show you what I do. So I'm going to be blatantly honest with you guys. I may or may not have gotten a phone call or a text message the following morning
from the shipping company that said, hey, your engine's here. I rolled out of bed, giddy as could be, ran up to the shipping location, picked it up, and came home. So I didn't do anything that I said I was going to do in that last clip. I brought the short block home and started doing my thing to it, and then I finished the heads up while I was assembling the long block. So, that being said, I am going to cut this video off right here. I am also going to apologize for the choppiness of film. I did not realize how choppy my filming quality was. When I had filmed this current video, it was probably 3 weeks ago. And I can honestly say in the 3-week time frame from when I filmed this till the time that you guys are seeing it, that my filming quality has gone up. Not to pat myself on the back, but my filming quality has gone up. So to that point, I'm going to stop and end this video here, and in the next video we will continue off where I left off here while I'm assembling the short block. So I would like to thank you all for watching, and I will catch you later. Also, I'm also going to say this. The car may run right now, but you guys are going to have to wait for that video to come out, because I'm not going to spoil it for you. I've been filming as I go, and I've been saving film. I also need to learn how to file my film accordingly, so that is that. Thanks, guys.